the next part is a side topic is for forensic science as an art form. What are the theories, topics for growth, etc., that the field is expanding into? And you already talked about some of that. So give us a little bit more about where's the future of forensic science going to look like.
Well, definitely, there's so many different things that forensic science is. Just to give you guys an idea, there's actually seven main areas in forensic science. And out of these seven, some really popular ones, you look at pattern recognition, that's fingerprints, things like tire impressions, things like shoe marks. And then there's biology, DNA analysis, or wildlife forensics as well. And one of my favorite areas is chemistry or materials analysis. There's actually two chemistry areas. One is drugs and toxicology as well, and then there's materials analysis. But certainly, what is the key leader in forensic science right now in terms of the golden standard that we really want to see, implemented across all areas of forensic science is DNA analysis. And the issue with that is that DNA analysis didn't even come out of this culture of looking at people to identify them based on what crime, we're currently investigating. But a lot of different areas did. And one of those areas is chemistry and materials analysis. In terms of the future of forensic science, this is going to be a big area because there's always these materials that transfer between people and places. Materials like fibers from the clothes that we wear, materials here from our body. Or, if you do something really violent, you're looking at things like glass, things like dirt. These things transfer between places and people all the time. And one of the ways that we're going to be able to figure out what is true or, who is responsible for certain crime is by looking at these very microscopic materials that transfer between places and people in order to connect people together. And one of my area of research really was all around this, looking at different materials and trying to identify what we call forensic signatures that can identify, let's say, particular locations where pollen grains would have come from, or identify particular brand manufacturers for materials like matchsticks or materials like paper, or even materials like glass or paints. So forensic science, at least in the chemistry materials analysis sense, we're going to look for forensic signatures in the future. And forensic signatures are going to be all about using different laboratory analytical techniques, like vastly different. Something as different as qualitative data that you might get from doing microscopy and describing the shape of a cross section of a fiber, and actually twinning that together with analytical or quantitative data from doing something like FTIR. No, not FTIR. Something quantitative would probably be ICP-MS on the materials of a elements inside of that actual material. And once you could twin qualitative and quantitative data together using something called multivariate statistics, which is really cool. That's a separate rabbit hole, this whole thing. But if you could twin those together, you could develop very robust forensic signatures that's going to be able to tell you, there is actual congruence, or let me see, what's a better word? Concordance between this fiber that was found at the carpet of this particular scene and this fiber that was found in the shoe of this particular individual. And once you have things like that, you might be able to do even better things like the fibers that we found in this car seat. We don't have anybody or anything to compare them to, but we know for sure that these fibers are from Levi's 501 jeans. We know for sure that there's only one store in this particular area that sells Levi's 501 jeans. And we actually know from this fiber that these jeans actually came out in the year 2020. So it has to be somebody who has a pair of these very specific jeans, and it still might be, a few hundred people in this particular area, but immediately you limit down what you're looking for. And that's what we want to get. That's the area that we want to get to in chemistry and materials analysis in forensic science. And being able to have good statistics that will tell us something along the lines of, well, we can say with 99% certainty that these are the type of genes that we're looking for. or well, it's only a small piece of the fiber. We didn't get much information from it. We only have a 50% certainty that these are the genes we're looking for. The other 50% would be this option,
Mm.
also 40% for this option, 30% for this option, things like that. Hopefully, that's where we're gonna go in the future. But there's also a lot of other exciting areas, and one of them being digital forensics. That's going to become bigger in the future because our lives are a lot more digital as well.
Mm.
So I'll just leave it there.
So, man, I'm gonna say this right now. So I work in epidemiology, mostly dealing with biostatistics and stuff like that. So a lot of stuff that you were saying sounded like jargon that I hear at my job, qualitative and quantitative. I think every field right now is trying to get both qualitative and quantitative data and try to marry them together because a lot of times we focus on quantitative because numbers quote unquote don't lie or the numbers are easy to understand, but a lot of times you know you could have a study saying let's see, you could say, well, the p-value is this, so therefore I can't reject my null hypothesis, therefore this is true. But then you have to think about why it's true, and I think that's this next step where the qualitative comes in. So then you might reference you might have a doctor colleague because I work alongside doctors as well, or some other person in the medical field who actually working with the patients. They're not looking at the data, but they could answer the question, why is this happening? They could say, well, oh yeah, that makes sense because we see a lot of patients come in with heart murmurs. So yeah, it makes sense that you see in the data. So stuff like that is very important. And then I was wondering though, so as Black men, and this is off topic maybe, but as Black men, uh, and with how the system is, at least in America, where people go to jail who are innocent or who are charged with things, and maybe the crime scene is uh, modified so that they're framed potentially. Um, how likely is it to have false positives with forensic science? And can you foresee it being used in this way that I'm describing?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have the statistics. I don't know the statistics about how frequently we have false positives across the range of different disciplines that are in forensic science. But I could definitely say that false positives have happened. They've happened for a very long time. People misinterpret the evidence as well. So these things happen. I remember reading about one case which was actually digital forensics. Somebody's computer, a gentleman, his computer was actually found to be constantly downloading child, and he was always denying it, like, no, I'm not doing that, definitely not me, kind of thing. But like, all the analysts could find was like, him using all these backdoor things through the dark web to constantly download this content, which was illegal in the place that he was living. It turns out that those analysts continued to look through his computer, and they were actually able to find a Trojan that was a virus that was doing this on purpose, maliciously, on his device. Guess when they found that?
Years
Wow,
later.
I don't.
After he was convicted of the crime.
Man.
Wow.
He was able to get out, and restitution that happens after persons have been um, wrongfully convicted, was actually paid out to him. But guess what? His life was really destroyed by that. His marriage, his profession, his relationship with other people, family, friends, like all these things jeopardized because people are malicious. And like I mentioned, with digital, with our lives becoming more digital, in the future we're gonna see more use of digital forensics. So these are the things we need to look out for. And I would just like to add that, servers are crime scenes. They definitely are. So many different things, so many different crimes happen in the digital realm. And I'm not a digital guy, but,
Mm.
just thinking about all the stuff that can possibly happen now, from identity theft, to um, people cooking their books for different companies. I mean, a lot of different stuff can happen. So yeah, these things happen, and it is likely, something that we have to safeguard against in the field. But definitely, the people that come before the justice system more often than not look like me and you, and in this particular age range.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a wider problem that we have in society, definitely in the continent of North America for sure. You know,
Yeah.
so you want to really start to pay attention. And I think people have an idea, that we need to pay attention to this issue because it doesn't make sense that, black people in the US, for example, are around 13 or 15% of the total population of the country. In the jails, it's a much higher percentage, like probably over 70% of persons who are incarcerated in the US, are black or African American. So, there's definitely going to be a few of those persons who are wrongfully convicted. Some of them probably with physical evidence that was interpreted incorrectly or was a false positive
Mm.
by a forensic scientist. How can we guard against this? We definitely need to do better in our profession. Forensic scientists need to understand that there is bias. All of us will have bias, and we need to put safeguards in place to guard against that. All of us are not doing the work that we need to do at the standard that we need to do. So we need to look into, getting better standards that's going to unify forensic science practices across broad areas. Definitely for a country like Canada, that's something that we do not have up here. There are no universal standards for forensic science. So somebody who is in the city of Toronto, which is in the province of Ontario, could be doing a toxicology test, and be doing it to a different standard than somebody else who's in a neighboring province called Quebec in the city of Montreal. And these things, doing the same things just slightly differently, they don't give us any confidence in terms of how can we avoid false positives or wrongful convictions in the bigger sense. So yeah, we definitely need to see big bodies doing oversight that's going to make sure that the standards of forensic science are upheld, for everybody living in any jurisdiction. So, that's something I would like to see for the future.
That's very interesting there. I had two things to talk about, well, to say. One is that I've watched CSI Cyber, and that show talks about, you know, the way that our lives are going now to the more digital age and how crimes can happen online, and you can always trace it back if it's online for the most part. So when you mentioned that, I immediately thought about that show, and I was like, yeah, because I growing up wanted to be a forensic scientist as well as many other things. So I watched CSI, I watch CSI Miami. I watched all these shows growing up, and I tried to learn things from them, and I never really knew how true they were. That'll come later. But the second thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the future of forensic science was either a movie or a TV show that I watched where they came to a point where you can tell if someone will commit a crime based on their DNA. And I want to ask you if that is far-fetched or you have any insight on that at all.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Before you answer, so that reminded me of this anime I was watching called Psychopaths.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, man, big shout outs to Psychopaths. Definitely one of the best animes. Like, really nice short series. One of the best in recent memory. I don't watch much anime now, but I love Psychopaths. But in terms of looking at people's DNA and being able to predict whether or not they would commit a crime, I think that's just foolishness. I think that's clear pseudoscience. I mean, think about how many crimes you have committed in your life. You probably don't remember committing any crimes, but have you driven over the speed limit? Have you parked your car in an area where you should not have parked? Have you ever thrown something down on the ground where you should not have littered? All of these, little infractions against the law, and some of them are actually criminal infractions. You know, so these things happen. Crime is a part of healthy societies. The aim is never going to be to eliminate crime from society. As ideal as people think that would be, it's actually not at all ideal, and it causes a lot of different issues. All of us have the same propensity to commit crime. I think that, is a pretty good statement to make, especially based on how many laws our societies have. All the laws are not going to be laws that we like, so there's going to be little things that we, try to get away with. But in terms of looking at violent crime and if people are going to be, more predisposed to committing those just based purely on DNA or their genetics, I don't like that. I don't think it's a good move for us to go that way. And the issue always becomes if you try to fight wars before they happen, this never ends up well. Never ends up well. The criminal justice system might not be perfect, but this whole idea of justice is about looking at things that have happened, trying to figure out what is true, who should be held accountable, and how they're gonna, make restitution for those actions. That's the cycle of justice. If you're trying to cut it all off and say, you will be responsible for a crime and we can't take that risk, then there's no opportunity for me to pay restitution or try to make it right. So how is that justice? So I don't like that idea at all. I don't think it's very scientific. And I really hope that people stop trying to do those things because, all of us, like I said, all of us have the same propensity to commit crime.
Look who it is.
He's looking great.
He just
made it.
he just bought some cake soap and
Oh no, not the cake soap.